Hello there, little masters, and welcome once again to the Prancing Pony Podcast, where tonight the fathers of men are traveling west, looking for the good stuff.
My Govanen, my friends. I'm Sean Marchese, and I'm joined once again by the Finrod to my Turgon, Alan Sisto.
Thanks, Sean. Of course, now that men are on the scene again, we might need to switch back to the Aragorn to your Éomer. After all, Finrod... I like that idea. Yeah, I do too. Well, you know, and I'm not trying to drop any spoilers here, but Finrod and Turgon might not be around much longer. Anyway, sorry. Get your chow and your branding iron, because tonight we're following the original wagon train, going west to the land of opportunity in Chapter 17 of the Silmarillion of the Coming of Men into the West.
Yeehaw! We saw men awaken a few
Good
chapters
Texas
ago.
shout.
Yeah, there you go. But we still haven't really seen much of them since they awakened a few chapters ago. That's all about to change, and change forever. Today we're going to learn about the three houses of the elf friends, also known as the Edain. That's E-D-A-I-N, but not pronounced Edain. Edain.
Not Edain. So is that a Northman joke? Dane? Get it?
Oh, man.
I'm so sorry.
That should be against the Dane law.
Oh, man. I've been bested. Hoisted on my own petard. You may want to get those notebooks handy, folks, or pull up the family trees at loaderproject.com, because there are going to be a lot of names to learn. Not as many as the famous F's chapter when we learned the entire Noldor family tree.
Right.
We will do our best to help you figure out which ones are worth remembering. And don't forget, there are also some limited family trees at the back of the book. But before we get into that, Sean, does old Bartleman have anything in his bag for us tonight?
Yes, he does, Alan. We've got a couple tonight. I want to do first one from a listener, Tarek, who lives in Chicago. He lives in Chicago now. He says he's originally from Bangladesh, so that's very interesting. But he wrote in with kind of a long question. I'll do my best to summarize it, and then I think it'll be maybe even a shorter answer than the question.
Maybe.
But so he writes in regarding the theory that you see from time to time that maybe the One Ring could have been destroyed by, maybe somebody jumping on an eagle and flying over Mordor and just dropping the ring in the volcano. And Tarek writes in, he's skeptical of those theories.
Sure,
he's saying, as amusing as these theories are, he says, I think they don't take the larger legendarium into consideration. It appears to me, he says, that the primary reason why Gandalf doesn't do this is that the Eagles only hearken to the commands of Manwë. He says it seems like it's possible that Gandalf is chummy with the Eagles and that even Manwë might have given him some permission to call on them when he needs them, but the intervention of the Eagles is really Manwë's particular way of helping the children of Ilúvatar against Sauron. And Tarek actually compares it to the way Manwë answered Fingon's prayer a couple of chapters ago and dispatched Thorondor to help him for the rescue of Maedhros.
Right. I'm still getting over the idea of Gandalf being chummy with the Eagles.
Chummy with the Eagles.
Just kind of
that was Tarek's word.
I know.
It is an evocative word. Yep.
It is. He goes bowling with them on Thursdays.
Right. They're in a league together.
So, what do you think of this one? I mean, is that the case? Is that they don't take the larger legendarium into consideration? Is that the primary reason?
Yeah.
Okay, we're done. Next up. Now serving number 39.
Right. No, I mean, seriously. I mean, yeah, I think it is. I think Tarek's right. I think if you want to know the answer to the question of why the Eagles don't do more, whether you want them to fly the Fellowship to Mordor and drop them off at the Morannon, or whether you want them to actually drop the ring into Mount Doom.
Well, yeah, if you're going to bring me that far, you might as well do the whole job.
You might as well bring me all the way. Just fly me right to the Sammath Naur.
Well, while you're here, can you just drop me off over there? I know this is the bus stop, but my house is just down the street.
Right over there. You see that red light over there? Can you just leave this there? Drop it in the crack. Well, we did. I think that is exactly the answer, though. We talked about it briefly long time ago, I think when we first met the Valar, that the Eagles are really a manifestation of Manwë's will.
Yeah, I think it was back in of Ali and Yavanna. We talked about how they're kind of a mix of Yavanna and Manwë.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Though they respond only to Manwë. Yeah.
Right. And it, we certainly speculated, how much free will do the Eagles even have? I don't even need to go into all that again, but they're definitely taking orders from Manwë. And to reiterate something that we talked about a few episodes ago, the general course of the Legendarium is from a lot of supernatural intervention in the early ages. It's all Valar and Maiar and Elves being, the main movers and shakers of what happens in Arda, to gradually less of the supernatural and more of humans taking over.
That's true.
And I think this that everything points to this being Eru's design. It's implied in places like the Athrobeth. And I think Lord of the Rings is really that point at which that's kind of the tipping point where men...
the end of the Third Age, absolutely.
Yeah. So, long story short, we'll learn more about the wizards and the role
it's too late for that. We're 27 episodes in. There's the long story short is long gone.
That's true. We have done nothing.
We've never been a long story short.
10 to 15 minutes on a page.
I should calculate our average at this point, but no, I don't have the math right now.
We'll work on that. We'll post it up.
I can't even math right now.
No math. But yeah, one of the things we see with the wizards is that they were a way for the Valar to influence the Third Age events without getting directly involved. And so I think we have to assume that applies to the Eagles as well.
Yeah.
And I think
assumption.
I think it's telling that the main times you see the Eagles show up is really when they're there to help Gandalf. It's almost don't you think it's almost more like they're there to help Gandalf with his
tasks,
his task,
exactly,
as opposed to helping the Fellowship directly.
Yeah, they're not going to do anything. They're going to help Gandalf, but they're not going to help everybody else.
Right. Exactly.
It's as though Manwë has kind of put them at Gandalf's bidding while he's over there. It's here's the eagle whistle.
I'm going to send you over there, and I'm going to let you use my car.
Yeah, exactly.
Or my plane. My private plane.
Here's my private plane. Here, call my pilot when you need something.
Yeah.
And that's true. Really what you've said is enough. But I'm going to touch on one other thing because that's what we do. One of the things we've talked about also about the appearance of the Eagles is that just about every time they appear, in fact, I would say every time they appear, it is a eucatastrophe to one extent or another. And if we go back to Tolkien's definition of a eucatastrophe, the very definition includes the fact that you cannot count on it happening again. So by definition, the Eagles you can't ever count on the Eagles getting involved. Because the minute you count on them, then it's not a eucatastrophe.
Yeah.
So,
then I guess it's just a Deus Ex Machina.
It is, in a way. I don't think he would even deny that, but it is definitely a means, like you pointed out, for the Valar to get involved without getting directly involved. And we see that Manwë thing especially, and Tarek mentioned this, the Fingon and Maedhros story. Maedhros specifically prays to Manwë, to whom all birds are dear. And Manwë answers eucatastrophically in the form of Thorondor.
Right.
So, anyway. Do we have time for one more?
Yeah, I think so. We've got another one that I think we can probably answer pretty quickly. So this one comes in from an old friend who's written in a few times, Maya in Michigan. Okay. So she writes in saying, in the podcast, you guys consistently refer to the sun and moon as a second best to Telperion and Laurelin. But it strikes me that it would be more accurate, or at least more thorough, to say that they were third best, as the trees themselves were a second best to Illuin and Ormal, the lamps. Mm-hmm. Yet in the second prophecy of Mandos, it says that Yavanna will rekindle the two trees. To put my question simply, if Arda Healed is truly perfect, just like Arda Unmarred, then why did they rekindle the two trees rather than restoring Illuin and Ormal?
Wow, that is a good question. Well, the first part of that question is easy. The reason why we refer to the sun and moon as second best is because we tend to do what Tolkien himself does. And he actually refers to that in letter 131, which is the preface, that the letter that I a lot of times refer to. It should be in the front of your volume.
Milton Waldman, yeah.
Exactly. He says specifically in there that the sun is not a divine symbol, but a second best thing.
Right.
And if he's saying it's a second best thing, then it's a second best thing, not a third best thing.
Right. Yeah. I think we'll go with we'll trust to his accuracy.
I kind of defer to his opinion on things.
Yeah.
When it's that explicit.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to remember the sun and moon were direct descendants of the trees. The trees are not descended from the lamps. It's not like the lamps fell and they captured some of the light from the lamps and that's what started the trees. So I think, we're talking about a new line, so to speak. The sun and moon are literally descended.
It's a new lineage.
Exactly. It's a new lineage. And I think that second best is meant to compare them to their actual predecessor.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, and the other thing that I'm reminded of is Tolkien says so often that change is inevitable in Arda. And, one of the recurring themes is that trying to halt change is folly or, worse,
That's true.
And it's strongly suggested by the text, I think, and we talked about this back when we did chapter 1, that the lamps just weren't right for Arda. They weren't a good fit. The lamps were constant daylight. They were unchanging. It was like constant noontime across,
that could get
all
old.
of Arda.
That could get old. Yeah.
And I think I don't remember if it's exactly there or if it's just later with the sun and moon where we hear that Yavanna is concerned about the fact that there's no night.
Yeah,
and
it is
Irmo
the sun and moon. It's the sun and moon portion.
It is.
But yeah, it's still the
and
same.
And Irmo is
concept.
concerned about there being no rest.
Yeah.
And so even though that is mentioned later, I think we would have to assume the same thing applies then. And so I think Arda is supposed to have seasons and changes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is meant to be mortal. I'm not sure about that, but I think that the lamps really are. I kind of see the lamps as almost sort of a failed experiment. Trying to create something perfect in an imperfect Arda. And so I think that Tolkien might not even say that they were necessarily better than the trees. And so maybe the trees are not second best to the lamps, if you see what I'm saying.
Maybe the trees are better than the lamps even. Or
maybe
at least,
so, yeah.
At least not lesser than.
Yeah.
I can buy that. I'm not sure, though, about the fact that they were trying to create something in an imperfect, something perfect in an imperfect Arda, because Arda wasn't marred until after that, right? I mean, the marring of
That's
Arda
true.
was the destruction of the lamps and the taking of this symmetrical, continent, this global continent. Well, not global because it wasn't a globe, circular continent, and making it no longer symmetrical and, raising mountains where they shouldn't have been and this kind of thing. But I see what you're talking about, that, the lamps were not something that were a good fit. I think that's a good way to put it. It seems to me that you're right, that there's an intention for Arda to have a waxing and a waning and seasons and night and day and twilight and dusk, and that the lamps weren't going to achieve that. That it's something that perhaps the Valar thought was the right thing.
Right.
Clearly they did. But it turns out that the trees may be better because that's indeed what they're going to rekindle. They could probably rebuild the lamps. Why not? I mean, if Morgoth is off, well, Melkor, Morgoth, whatever. I mean, if we're talking about first stage, we're talking about the lamps, then it was Morgoth then. But if we're talking about at the end of time when, Melkor's gone, destroyed, then they could recreate the lamps if they wanted to. But I think there's a reason why they're restoring the trees, and it's because they are better, because they are fit for the purpose.
Even if maybe perfect before the marring maybe wasn't the right word, but certainly mortal. It seems like it's meant to be a mortal world, doesn't it?
That's probably
a mortal Earth.
But it's definitely a mortal Earth because we know this is something that came to mind when I was looking at this question. Is when she talks about Arda being remade, we know that the trees will be restored. Fëanor will be humbled. He'll bring out the Silmarils, give them to Yavanna. She'll restore the trees. The Pelori will be leveled, and the light of the trees will go everywhere.
That's right. Yeah.
And there's this concept. Let me read a little bit out of Ainulindalë. There's a passage in Ainulindalë that I think speaks really well to this. This is short. This is very early on. I mean, this is like maybe the second or third page, talking about the music, and the echo of the music went into the void, and it was not void. And then it follows with this: never since had the Ainur made any music like to this music, though it has been said that a greater still shall be made before Ilúvatar by the choirs of the Ainur and the children of Ilúvatar after the end of days. So we're talking about after the end of days, music from the Ainur and Elves and Men, whereas the music that we're all familiar with from Ainulindalë is just the Ainur. So this is a much bigger choir, and it's after the end of days. So there's already from the very beginning an intention for there to be an end of days. So you're right. I think it's clear that Arda
there's
was
that mortality,
mortal.
Yeah.
So then after the end of days, and when this choir of the Ainur and Men and Elves sing, the themes of Ilúvatar shall be played aright, Well, that implies that they weren't necessarily played or right this first time. Remember, he gives them the score, so to speak, and then they play it and ad-lib. So here they're actually going to do it the right way. And then what happens after that? They will take being in the moment of their utterance, the themes. For all shall then understand fully his intent in their part, and each shall know the comprehension of each. And Iluvatar shall give to their thoughts the secret fire, being well pleased. So we're going to have this.
So it's actually it's actually being created as they sing, as opposed to the first time where they sang it, then there was the vision, and then there was Ea,
and then they have to make it happen in physical reality,
right? And then they actually have to play it out the time. Yeah,
they sing it, and it is, and Iluvatar is able to make it that way because it will be perfect. The themes will be played aright, because everybody is going to understand their job and the jobs of the others, and Iluvatar is going to give their thoughts the secret fire, right away. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's this idea of Arda remade that is. This is kind of getting a little far afield, but it definitely jives with Tolkien's worldview in terms of the Christian concept of a new Earth.
Sure,
which is very, very similar. Yeah. I mean, that's a big topic for another time, but it's this notion of, like you said, a mortal Arda that will someday end and be recreated in a truly perfect form. And interestingly, that perfect form will include the lamps. The trees, not the lamps. Would include
the trees instead of the lamps. Yeah. So I think
that something.
That tells us something about what really was the first best.
Exactly. Yeah. I agree. Well, Bartleman did a good job this time.
He did. Yeah. Thank you, Barley.
Yeah. Good on you, sir. Appreciate that. I can use another pint when you get a chance.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and turn to the text then and start today's discussion. We get into chapter 17. We're almost halfway through the volume now, making good progress. Hard to believe
it doesn't feel that way sometimes.
No, I know. It feels like we're just slogging through it at 12 minutes a page or whatever the average is, but it's good.
Yeah, we're enjoying it.
We are. This has been a lot of fun.
Hope you out there listening are enjoying it too. We like digging deep.
We do, and
hopefully
clearly
you have figured that out by now.
7 or 8 of you do as well, and that's good to know. I guess we figured out it went up to 11 last time, right?
Yeah.
Everything good goes to 11.
There's your Spinal Tap reference for the night.
Exactly. So we'll start at the beginning. We're not going to read that first paragraph, but it's just interesting to look at the timeline. You should note this. This is 300 years after the Noldor arrive in Beleriand. So we're in the middle of the long peace. So this is about 250 years after the Dagor Aglareb and the beginning of the siege. Okay. So it's also about 150 years before, and this is a little bit of a spoiler alert, the Dagor Bragalach, which will be coming up. And also kind of fit this in with the last chapter, since we saw what happened with Maeglin. The beginning of this chapter, this moment, 300 years after the Noldor have arrived, is actually about 100 years before the end of the last chapter. Okay. Right. So this is kind of like back before.
Kind of a jump back.
Right. We're kind of jumping back a little bit. But
we're going to cover a lot of time in this chapter. So yeah.
I mean, Turgon has already built Gondolin. Gondolin already is, because that was done much more previously.
Right.
But in terms of just timeline, it's good to fit that in.
Yeah.
So I hope you're all looking at the maps, because we see where he's at, right? Finrod goes on a hunting trip with Maglor and Maedhros, so he's still connecting with the sons of Feanor. And he goes on towards the east, towards the Ered Lindon, and he takes the Dwarf Road. So if you're looking at the map at loaderproject.com, the map of Beleriand, you'll see that he takes the Dwarf Road, crosses the River Gelion, that's the north-south river there, and he goes over the upper streams of Ascar and into the north of Osiriand. That's relevant so we can see where we're at, because this is where we're first going to see men.
Men.
And I'll go ahead and read those first couple paragraphs, and then we'll go from there. In a valley among the foothills of the mountains, below the springs of Thalos, he saw lights in the evening, and far off he heard the sound of song. At this he wondered much, for the green elves of that land lit no fires, nor did they sing by night. At first he feared that a raid of orcs had passed the leaguer of the north, but as he drew near he perceived that it was not so, for the singers used a tongue that he had not heard before, neither that of dwarves nor of orcs. Then Felagund, standing silent in the night shadow of the trees, looked down into the camp, and there he beheld a strange people. Now these were a part of the kindred and following of Beor the Old, as he was afterwards called, a chieftain among men. After many lives of wandering out of the east, he had led them at last over the Blue Mountains, the first of the race of men to enter Beleriand. And they sang because they were glad, and believed that they had escaped from all perils, and had come at last to a land without fear. Long Felagund watched them, and love for them stirred in his heart, but he remained hidden in the trees until they had all fallen asleep. Then he went among the sleeping people, and sat beside their dying fire where none kept watch. And he took up a rude harp, which Beor had laid aside, and he played music upon it, such as the ears of men had not heard, for they had as yet no teachers in the art, save only the dark elves in the wild lands.
Such a vivid scene. This is one of those that just gets me right there. I'm
right in the feels.
Right there,
right in the feels.
Yeah,
it is.
And it's just I see the darkness. I see the fire. I hear the music. I hear the song.
It is vivid.
It's incredible.
Really is. Wow. There were a couple of things I almost stopped to point out some things, but it's such a beautiful passage I didn't want to interrupt myself.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you went through it. We can talk about a couple of things.
The springs of Thalos, so that's the next river down below Askar.
Yeah.
So you can see that's where he sees them. I loved just this beautiful idea of him just watching them quietly. I mean, okay, mildly creepy, but
it's a little creepy.
Like,
just
okay, need a restraining order. And I think the first time I read this, okay, confession, I was, probably 19? And he took up a rude harp. I'm like, how can a harp be rude? Hey, you stupid elf, don't pick me up.
Don't pick me up.
Put me down, you idiot. Burp.
Yeah, right, yeah. Oh, man, a rude harp.
Took me a while. Again, good reason to have a dictionary, because you need to know the other meanings of words that you probably know, but he uses the words differently. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I love this idea that the men who were there, the men were singing because they were glad.
I know.
Because
isn't that nice?
They thought they'd come to a land without fear. That's cute,
isn't it? Isn't it now?
I mean, granted,
bless their hearts, as they say down in Texas, right?
Exactly.
Bless your heart.
Bless your heart. Yeah, I mean, sure, they came from some rough stuff. They're fleeing some bad situations, but
very
it's like
dark.
You guys didn't know Angband is right over there,
right?
Exactly.
This is out of the frying pan and into the fire.
Right. Yeah, but man, it's just they're naive. They're men. They haven't.
They're innocent.
They haven't been enlightened by the Valar. They haven't, they didn't have Orome come and get them,
Yeah, nobody came and said, "Hey, you want to come over to this really cool place where nobody dies?"
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, they're just figuring it out as they go.
In fact, they'll be told, "Don't you dare! Don't you dare come over here where nobody dies!
Don't you dare come to our place where nobody dies! You can't come here."
That's right.
But yeah, they saw the sun. They headed west, and they're just kind of figuring it out as they go. And
we'll get a little bit more on that, won't we? We'll get more about why they wanted to come to the west.
Yeah, we will.
I love that Felagund, love for them stirred in his heart. I don't know that a lot of elves really felt that way about men.
I think you're right. Yeah.
But Finrod is special. We talked about this before with him, that there's something really, really amazing about Finrod.
Yeah, he's just so noble.
Truly noble. That's a good word.
And he's wise. Remember how wise he is.
Very. And we'll get to more of his wisdom here in the next couple of paragraphs, won't we?
Yeah. Yes, we will. And you got to figure his love is somehow, connected to that wisdom. He knows that there's something right and good about these men. They may probably have, really shaggy hair and bushy beards, and they look really uncouth to most elves, but he sees a beauty in them. And, it's lovely.
He would remember hearing about them, obviously the lies right among the Noldor about the coming of men to usurp them. But because he's wise, he would realize these are also made by Iluvatar. These are children of Iluvatar, just like we are.
Yeah.
And I think there's an appreciation of that, and that does come from wisdom and from humility. Which is something we
humility is a good word
Noldor.
for it, because and Finrod does tend to be one of the most humble of the Noldor.
Yeah. Beautiful stuff. How did the men respond? I love this next stuff. Can't wait to hear you tell us about this.
Before I get to that, I there's one more thing. I love the harp. He picks up the harp, and they had never. Let's see, music upon it such as the ears of men had not heard.
Yeah.
There's this idea here that they learned something of music, something of culture from dark elves in the Wildlands, but here they are. They're face to face with. Yeah, this is full-blown Calaquendi, like right there.
Yeah, one of the best right here.
Exactly. I mean, this is like growing up listening to like Journey covers at the state fair, and now you're suddenly hearing Led Zeppelin live, But yeah, I love that because you see just instantly so much knowledge that men have to gain, so much wisdom that men have to gain from Finrod and from the elves.
We apologize to any of our followers who listen to Journey over Led Zeppelin because you just insulted them.
Nobody does that. Nobody listens to Journey more than Led Zeppelin.
I hope not, but it is interesting. I mean, it's still just a harp, and but Finrod's able to do something on it that they have never heard. Just richness. Like, everybody kind of plays around with the guitar, might have 3 chords, and as Bob Dylan says, 3 chords and a truth. But
that's a really good analogy for this, actually.
Yeah, everybody can kind of strum a little bit and pick a few chords, but then you give the guitar to somebody who's a true master, who plays classical guitar, for instance, and it sounds like 3 guitars playing at once, and you're just like, how do you do that? And
he's got the violin bow, he's raking it across the strings, and he's just
that's pretty cool. So do the men say, this has a pretty nice beat, I can dance to it?
Not exactly.
No. Tell us what they did.
All right. Now men awoke and listened to Felagund as he harped and sang, and each thought that he was in some fair dream, until he saw that his fellows were awake also beside him. But they did not speak or stir while Felagund still played, because of the beauty of the music and the wonder of the song. Wisdom was in the words of the Elven King, and the hearts grew wiser that hearkened to him. For the things of which he sang, of the making of Arda, and the bliss of Aman beyond the shadows of the sea, came as clear visions before their eyes, and his elvish speech was interpreted in each mind according to its measure. Thus it was that men called King Felagund, whom they first met of all the Eldar, Nome, that is wisdom, in the language of that people. And after him they named his folk Nomen, the wise. Indeed, they believed at first that Felagund was one of the Valar, of whom they had heard rumor that they dwelt far in the west. And this was, some say, the cause of their journeying. But Felagund dwelt among them and taught them true knowledge, and they loved him, and took him for their lord, and were ever after loyal to the house of Finarfin.
Man, is that a passage or what?
Oh, that is just one of my favorites in the entire book.
I know. I knew I had to give that one to you.
I appreciate it.
Wisdom was in the words of the Elven King. I love this. Why did the hearts grow wiser? The things that he sang, of the making of Arda, the bliss of Aman, and he's able to make them come alive as visions before their eyes. And even though they can't, Elvish, right?
Even though they don't speak Elvish, yeah. It reminds me a bit of, although this is much greater, of the Hobbits and their reaction to Gildor and Glorian, his company, in Fellowship. And I think there's, I don't have that book in front of me, of course, but it talks about how they're singing "I Elbereth Gilthonio" in Elvish, and the Hobbits don't speak Elvish. Frodo speaks a little bit.
Frodo has a few words here and there.
Yeah, but they understand it, even though they don't speak the language. But it's just such a powerful image, and here it's actually coming to life for them. Amazing stuff.
It really is, and of course now I'm going to try to find that passage. But before we do, you had a little bit on Nome, didn't you? I thought this was fascinating. Typical word nerdery, and it just made me go, wow, Sean. So tell me what this is.
I see a weird word. I'm gonna chase it down that rabbit hole. This is one of my favorite puns in.
So this is Nome, not Nom. This isn't Nom
yes.
Nom.
Right. No, it's not Cookie Monster. It's this is Nome.
Right. Like gnome.
Right. Like gnome. And those who have read the Book of Lost Tales, or I think it's even in the first few books of the history of Middle-earth, which we don't talk about a whole lot because mostly those are rough drafts of the Silmarillion, right?
Right.
But in those early drafts of what became the Silmarillion, Tolkien actually did refer to the Noldor as gnomes, Gnomes, like gnome, like a garden gnome.
Like the Travelocity gnome.
Like the Travelocity gnome, yeah. Pointed hat, beard, the whole works, except not. I'll get into that. The reason he used the word gnomes was because we've talked about the fact that Noldor means wise, means the wise ones. And the English word gnome has kind of an uncertain etymology, but one possibility is that it might have come from the Greek word gnome, which means thought or intelligence or opinion. So it would have kind of a similar meaning. And so Tolkien was kind of playing with that word of the English word gnome in translating Noldor. Now he did away with this because he felt like it was too misleading. He said, and I quote, the Noldor, they in no way resembled the gnomes either of learned theory or popular fancy.
Right.
In other words, they were these tall, beautiful, dark-haired creatures of light, not bearded little guys with pointed hats jumping across mushrooms.
Which is a good thing. I'm not sure I would have read that book.
Which is a good thing. And that's why I think that the gnomes thing, I think it's one of those things that Tolkien fans kind of cringe when you talk about the Noldor being gnomes because it turns into that. And I get that why Tolkien avoided that. But he abandoned it pretty late. In fact, I recently got my copy of the first edition facsimile of The Hobbit.
Oh, the one that we're giving away.
The one that we're giving away, that's right. And if you look at the passage where Elrond talks about Gondolin, they're actually still referred to as gnomes in that first edition. And I think even in early drafts of Lord of the Rings, he was still calling them gnomes. So it was definitely late. I didn't realize
he was doing it that late.
Yeah, he was. So,
I knew about the first edition. I'd forgotten, but I remembered it. I didn't realize that even in some of the early drafts of Lord of the Rings, he was doing that.
Yeah, early drafts, not published. I think he got it all out of there before it was ever published. But
yeah, definitely.
So anyway, I think, Tolkien had reasons for getting away from the term gnome. But notice what he does here. Remember that the Silmarillion is written from an Elvish perspective.
Right.
And what he says here is that it was men who called Finrod Felagund gnome.
Those
and called
silly
the
men.
Noldor the gnome. Yeah, those silly men, right?
Silly men.
So it's a way of saying that they weren't really gnomes. They didn't call themselves gnomes, but the first men who met them called them gnomes.
So once again, he finds a way to make things fit within his universe, even a rewrite.
Right, exactly. And then he's able to kind of, I know, it's brilliant. And he hides it so well because, if he had spelled it Gnome, they called them gnomes, which means wise. That would have been so obvious.
Too obvious,
But to respell it, Nom, it just hides it, and you kind of have to look for it. In fact, I probably read this book 10 times before I picked up on it.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on it until I read some of the history of Middle-earth, until Book of Lost Tales. Yeah. Then I was like, oh, wait a minute, isn't that what
Yeah.
Fascinating.
But, so I don't know. I love it because it's just one of those little things. He's got a few of these little puns sprinkled throughout that are kind of reference points to, other myths, real-world myths and real-world folklore.
You'll have to point those out to us as they come along for sure.
I will. Yeah, I would love to. But this is one of my favorite ones. I don't have the aversion to gnomes that a lot of Tolkien fans do. I kind of like gnomes, so when I see this, I get excited.
Well, our interest in gnomes is one-sided. I'm glad that they're not gnomes. I did, however, find that passage in the Lord of the Rings. I'm a gnome enthusiast.
I'm a gnome connoisseur.
A gnome connoisseur. So you're able to tell the difference between the ones with like red hats and the ones with blue hats, and what they each mean. And
you don't want to mess with those blue hat guys.
No, those are scary ones.
They are really rough, scary guys.
What they're packing in those statues.
No, right.
So in chapter 3 of Lord of the Rings, book 1, Three's Company, you were talking about the elves. Yeah, you were talking about the hobbits' reaction to Gildor and Glorian. Here's the passage right before Frodo does interpret the words. He's able to actually understand them. But here's the line: "The singing drew nearer. One clear voice rose now above the others. It was singing in the fair elven tongue, of which Frodo knew only a little, and the others knew nothing. Yet the sound, blending with the melody, seemed to shape itself in their thought into words which they only partly understood. This was the song as Frodo heard it, and then there's the translation. So even the ones that don't speak it at all, they knew nothing of the elven tongue. They were able to understand partly. Right. Yeah, they pick up on the meaning because the sound blended with the melody shaped itself in their thought. So definitely fits right there with what we hear with Felagund here, with Finrod. That his elvish speech was interpreted in each mind according to its measure. Great stuff.
Yeah. So cool.
I love that he taught them true knowledge. True knowledge.
Yeah.
You know, there's a point here where knowledge, just information, isn't necessarily helpful, but there's a point here. He's teaching them true knowledge, valuable knowledge. I'm thinking there's a Greek word, teleos, right? Kind of not perfect, complete, whole, I guess would maybe be a good word for that. Kind of makes me think of that this is valuable knowledge. This is the knowledge that you really need. And they loved him, you know?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a part of him. Now, he wasn't around at Cuiviénen when the elves first awoke.
No.
But he would have been told those tales of when Orome came and all of that. There had to be this moment in his heart when he watched over them. I am going to be for them what Orome was for the first elves. And that gives me this great responsibility to
give them the truth.
Right. Yeah. I have to be super careful here. This is going to be a very important moment in the history of these people.
Wow. Yeah, that's really, I never picked up on that. That parallel is really big.
It's such a, I think there was even a moment, didn't Orome, it was the singing of the elves that brought Orome, if I remember correctly.
That's true, yeah.
I have to go back and pull that up, but
see if I can find that one.
Yeah, it's just that struck me.
But you're right, the parallel is there because it does say, they even thought he was one of the Valar, which again is kind of adorable, kind of naive, but why not? This is the most enlightened being they've ever met. Again, they've met dark elves, but this is full on Calaquendi right here.
Yeah, to the point where kind of the earth glows around his feet, in Peter Jackson style filming.
Yeah, and you are correct. Orome wondered and sat silent, and it seemed to him that in the quiet of the land under the stars, he heard afar off many voices singing.
Yeah.
So that was what drew him to them.
It's the music. Isn't it amazing the
amazing parallel?
The role that music plays too.
Oh,
music is such an important element in Tolkien's world.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is the design and the creation of this cosmic drama.
Exactly. It's at the very core.
It's the very beginning. Yeah.
Really cool. Wow. So so they give him a really nice name. They call him Wisdom, and they call his folk the Wise. And I just had to say, as an aside, that's a lot nicer than the Elvish names for men. The usurpers, the heavy-handed.
The usurpers or the sickly.
Come on. So I'm thinking men should come up with some better names for elves. I'm thinking things like the arrogant, the self-important, the overbearing, the slayers of kin, the rebellious, the ship burners, the proud.
Yeah.
But they don't know those things yet.
The light imprisoners.
The light imprisoners.
Yeah, they really don't know that one yet.
They really don't. Yeah. Oh, man. Just
I don't know. The Thralls. Feanor would love that one.
The Thralls.
The Vala Thrala.
Okay, we're done.
I'm sorry.
Ladies and gentlemen,
sorry.
Our episode is over. We'll come back to you in 2 weeks when we can finish this chapter. Oh, man. No, we'll just move on from that and read the next.
Please.
We've had worse. We've had worse
come out of my mouth for sure.
Both of us, yeah. Sometimes I'm surprised people still listen, but I'm grateful. I'm so grateful.
I am very grateful. If they're still listening
after that. If they're still listening now after that, Valatrala. Right. Wow.
Go back to Tolkien, who can actually use words. You go ahead and read that next paragraph.
I think I will. Let me get that laughter out of my... Now the Eldar were beyond all other peoples, skilled in tongues, and Felagund discovered also that he could read in the minds of men such thoughts as they wished to reveal in speech. so that their words were easily interpreted. It is said also that these men had long had dealings with the dark elves east of the mountains, and from them had learned much of their speech. And since all the languages of the Quendi were of one origin, the language of Beor and his folk resembled the elven tongue in many words and devices. It was not long, therefore, before Felagund could hold converse with Beor, and while he dwelt with him, they spoke much together. But when he questioned him concerning the arising of men and their journeys, Beor would say little. And indeed he knew little, for the fathers of his people had told few tales of their past, and a silence had fallen upon their memory. "A darkness lies behind us," Beor said, "and we have turned our backs upon it, and we do not desire to return thither even in thought. Westwards our hearts have been turned, and we believe that there we shall find light." Once again, Eldar skilled beyond the others in terms of language.
In terms of language, yep.
And the Noldor, if I'm not mistaken, even more so, as we found out in previous chapters, than the Sindar.
That's right.
So not a surprise that that Finrod is able to, really quickly interpret what the men are saying. But I found this interesting, that he could actually read their thoughts so long as they wish to reveal them in speech. So he's, I guess if it means it's a secret thought, he can't read it. That's good. That's helpful. There's some privacy.
They must be able to sort of guard their thoughts some way.
Yeah.
Actually, we saw that a little bit with Myglin, too, who had a little ability to read thoughts. Yeah. Yeah. And he could read thoughts, but I think he had to kind of trying to get at some secret thoughts in his mother's brain.
Right. That's true.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. Just no, you didn't cut me off. I just thought that was an interesting thing that they're able to read minds to some extent. I mean, we can even go back, that excellent example you gave of both Eol and Myglin, but also even of Feanor himself, who was able to perceive, Melkor's heart, which actually probably wouldn't have been all that hard. We all know what Melkor's after.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's able to interpret what they want to say.
It's like he's got a built-in Babelfish from Hitchhiker's Guide. Remember that?
I definitely do. I definitely remember the Babelfish. My goodness. Let's see. So not the thoughts they didn't wish to reveal. Yeah. They learned their speech from the Avari, so there were those similar roots. And you had something to say about that, didn't you?
A little bit, yeah. I just I've seen a few places where this early sort of this first phase Mannish language is referred to as Taliska. I think I've spoken about it before.
Yeah.
And we get a few words of it. I mean, presumably Gnome that we had in the previous paragraph is Taliska.
Right. Right.
I don't know much about it because I don't think there's a whole lot published on it, but I know that Tolkien based the sounds of it on Germanic. I think specifically Gothic, because Tolkien was one of his early experiments was like trying to reconstruct a Gothic tongue, because there's not much, Gothic.
There's not much, yeah.
There's not much, yeah. So I think he based Taliska on his early experiments with reconstructing Gothic.
Okay.
And so we'll see a few words in Taliska throughout this chapter. I'll point out a few because I think some of them you can kind of point to Germanic roots, which is kind of neat for me.
Yeah.
But I just think it's fascinating that, again, they learn speech from the Avari. So there's still this idea that elves were the originators of speech.
Yeah.
Even Mannish speech, came from Avari. And I think, I think elsewhere Tolkien writes about they, maybe picked up a little bit of Dwarvish and that got in there too.
Sure.
And just,
that is interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
well, they were the creators of language, right? I mean, their first name for themselves was those that speak with voices,
those that speak,
right?
yeah, Quendi, those that speak with voices.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a neat thing, and I think just worth pointing out that the language that they're speaking now is not the Adunaic language we'll see later on.
Right. I agree. Well, I thought this was interesting. We get a little bit, just a very small glimpse of what is in the past. It's kind of the shadow of the past, if you will, if I can borrow a chapter title.
That's a good phrase. Where'd you get that?
I don't know. I just kind of made that up. Yeah. Tales of the past were few. It's not, I'm trying to keep a secret. It's truly, we don't talk about that.
Yeah.
And,
well,
if you do that for a generation, then,
then suddenly people don't know. Yeah, I mean,
right.
You're not dealing with immortal elves. You're dealing with people who have a limited lifespan. And, what men have been around for a few hundred years now. So
right. Well, we get this after many lives of wandering. Beor had led them at last over the mountains. I mean, that's, so all it takes is a couple of generations to not tell the story, and the story's gone in a people who don't have written language. So, he says, a darkness lies behind us. I love this, though. We don't want to even go there. We don't even want to think about that. Our hearts have been turned to the west. Mm-hmm. I don't know. There's something to me about the fact that, we've turned our hearts to the west. Our hearts have been
westwards.
Turned to the
our
west.
Hearts have been turned. Oh,
by
interesting.
whom? I really, to me, this speaks of Iluvatar, turning their hearts, of saying, of just subtly getting in there and calling them, if you will, if you want to use a different kind of terminology, and saying, come this way.
I could say maybe it's not that. Maybe it's just something they're born with, but I don't think. I think it's the same thing.
Right. Because if they're born with it, then that's also an Iluvatar thing, isn't it?
Right. Exactly. So I'm like, well, do I have a counterpoint to that? No, I don't think so, because I think we're saying the same thing two different ways. I mean,
You're right.
Yeah, it's something. It's something that has been put there.
Yeah.
That they have not done
to
themselves.
them that they've not. Yeah. Right. Exactly. And again, I love how light's capitalized. It's just subtle things that Tolkien does to remind us of the importance of things like light.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
And we talked about the sun, how the sun first rose in the west.
Yeah.
And that was the first thing they saw. And they've been following that light ever since. So that's why they believe there's light in the west. So they're chasing sort of a literal light.
But now
it's memory of the sun. But now it's a figurative light.
Yeah, because now the sun doesn't rise in the west anymore. After they kind of fixed that.
Right, right. They're seeking the Valar. They're seeking enlightenment at this point.
Yes, enlightenment's a good word, because we're going to get to that, I think, at the very end of the chapter.
Yeah.
And then there's not enough time for us to go into it, but I want to suggest that there is an extended version of this story for those of you who have the history of Middle Earth in Morgoth's Ring. Tale of Edain, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Tale of Edain. It's in. I think it's in the commentary section of the Athrabeth Finrod.
Yeah, it is. It's associated with the Athrabeth.
Yeah.
Because she refers to that in her discussion.
Andreth does. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
In her debate with
and that's
Finrod,
also,
with this guy right here.
Right. That's right.
This is the guy who's part of the Athrabeth.
Again, being humble before a human, before a woman. It does go into at least a version of the story of what that darkness is that they left behind. And you're right. I wish we had time to get into it. But it's just a fascinating story.
It really is.
Definitely, there were Morgoths involved.
Yes, there were. I know that we can't realistically, we can never do the history of Middle Earth as a series. It would take us like 17 years to get through all of that. But I think that I would like at some point, maybe after the Silmarillion, maybe even after the Hobbit, to pick just a couple of sections like the Athrabeth, or cool. Maybe Laws and Customs or something like that, and kind of just chat through some of those pieces. Because those shed so much light.
That would be fun.
That might be something to think about. But for now,
I might like to do. Well, I shouldn't promise this, but I wouldn't mind doing some of the poems and Lays of Beleriand,
you're not kidding. That would,
or even
beautiful.
Book of Lost Tales. But it's something.
That
we can
may
always
be something
do
more for our essays. For folks who really want to dig deep. I don't want to.
Or we can do special. We'll see.
Episode here and there.
Special episode here and there.
It's always fun. We're not going to read the next, couple of paragraphs here, but we are going to talk about this. We see that Morgoth was aware of the arrival of men, and this is fascinating. He himself departed from Angband. Not something he did. In fact, I think we read earlier that once only did he leave his halls in the north, and this was it. He felt this was important enough to leave Sauron in command. And to go. We don't find out exactly what he did, but we know that now a darkness lays upon the hearts of men. So that's where
that's a good catch, because I always thought that one time that he left was a reference to the next chapter,
to the battle that we're going to see.
Yeah.
I know. I thought so too, but
maybe not, because that battle was right before his gates. So maybe
maybe
Tolkien wouldn't
left
consider
his
that
lands, right? That he
could be.
left his realm.
Yeah.
And in this case, he went out there to deal with men directly.
Right.
Which is a heavy, heavy thing for men to bear,
Yeah.
They hadn't been enlightened yet. They hadn't been to Valinor and seen the light of the trees and met the Valar. So,
No. And again, thinking back to the Tale of Adenel, it's all about him sort of being the first one on the scene and all the lies he tells them.
Oh, yeah.
It's really interesting.
Well, and he knows how to lie. He knows how to weave a tale in such a way that it's believable. Look at what he did to the Noldor.
Yeah.
And they are enlightened.
And they were enlightened, exactly.
Right.
Right.
Some of the most enlightened around.
Yeah.
Okay, they weren't the other branches.
The Vanyar.
The Vanyar. I wanted to say the Valar. I'm like, no, hello. No. They weren't the Vanyar going, singing around, OMG Manway.
Right, OMG Manway.
So they weren't totally enlightened, but they were pretty enlightened.
OMG Manway. OMG Teniquitil.
OMG Teniquitil.
I wasn't going to do it.
That's for all the fans of our. That's for all the fans of our outtakes.
Of our new outtake.
We should mention that for those of you. It's just because it's a hoot. For those of you who don't follow us on social media, please do, because we don't have our outtakes on an actual podcast episode. We posted them to our website. So please go to theprancingponypodcast.com and share a few laughs with us. There will, I'm sure, be more in the future.
It's got some plain silliness up there right now.
Almost certainly going to have some funny stuff in the future. So we don't know exactly the specifics, but we know that the purpose, of course, was to corrupt and destroy, because that's what Morgoth does. That's who he is. And just like he wanted to make the Noldor opposed to each other, here he wants to make men the foes of the Eldar, and to use them as a weapon against Beleriand.
Yeah.
But Morgoth.
The last thing he would want would be both of them allied against him.
Exactly. But Morgoth got interesting. The Eldar got strong, and Morgoth felt like he had to go back. And so, the job never really got finished. So then we find out about more people coming. Beor tells them about the Haladin and the people ruled by Marach. We'll get to all of those groups, but I wanted to point that out, that he's pointing out, hey, there's going to be more coming.
Right. Because real quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, well, just real quickly, I'd also point out that the Haladin, we don't know too much about them, but we know that they're sundered in speech from the people of Beor and the people of Marach. So if they're sundered in speech, remember, we use that as a telegraph for they're sundered in culture.
Culture, absolutely.
So they're definitely, there's a closer kinship between the people of Beor and the people of Marach than there is to the Haladin.
The Haladin, agreed.
And sure enough, we're going to see way more of them than we will see of the Haladin.
Yeah, the Haladin eventually they do kind of disappear from the scene, except for one small area. So I am going to read this next paragraph, because I think this is pretty interesting stuff here about the reaction, not of Finrod, but of some of the less enlightened elves. Now, the green elves of Osirian were troubled by the coming of men, and when they heard that a lord of the Eldar from over the sea was among them, they sent messengers to Felagund. Lord, they said, if you have power over these newcomers, bid them return by the ways that they came, or else to go forward. For we desire no strangers in this land to break the peace in which we live. And these folk are hewers of trees and hunters of beasts. Therefore we are their unfriends, and if they will not depart, we shall afflict them in all ways that we can.
There's our unfriends again.
Including like a Twitter storm, probably. Hashtag tree killer.
Hashtag tree. Hashtag hewer.
Yeah.
Hashtag hunter.
Unfriends. He uses that word a few times, doesn't he?
He does, yeah.
I always come back to Feanor and Galadriel.
Yeah. Tell me if I'm reading too much into this. They send messengers to Felagund. Now, obviously, they're going to send messengers to the person who can speak with them, because Felagund speaks Elvish. But you got to think there's just an element of the green elves don't even see men as completely sentient beings.
Right.
They're not even attempting to communicate directly with men. They're just going straight to the elf, because they think they're probably don't think they're much better than animals at this point. Yeah.
Well, and I think also there's probably a little bit of we'll see it later. A little bit of wrong word, cowardice. Again, I don't want to be mean to the green elves, but you'll see later that they hide from one group because they're afraid of them. I think they're probably afraid of these guys, and they're thinking, well, I don't want to come out and tell them to leave because they might hurt us. We're only armed with slender bows.
Once again, slender bows.
You guys should get something other than slender bows. That's a problem. Yeah. That's kind of like the red shirt in Star Trek, the slender bows in Middle Earth.
Right. Anybody who's carrying slender bows is
red shirt.
Not long for this Arda. That you could be. Yeah, you probably are right about that.
Just a little bit of fear,
Maybe just kind of thinking of them as wild animals, just something that can't be
untamable.
Can't be reasoned with. Yeah,
you tell your pet to go home. You take that pit bull. Exactly. You make sure that's attached by a chain, and you tell him to go someplace
big
else.
Hairy thing with the rude harp. You tell him to get out of here.
Harp. Who are you calling rude? We were talking about this earlier. The Green Elves were saying, "You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here."
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. We were talking about that one, the bartender.
Yeah. That's that song from the '90s. The
Closing Time.
Yeah.
Semisonic.
Semisonic. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. I'd love to hear you sing it. Sing it, Sean.
No. Right.
Okay, I didn't think I could get you to. I'll try. No. We'll try again.
So it's a little after my time anyway. I was kind of an early 90s kid. That was more of a late 90s thing.
I was more an 80s kid. Remember, I'm older than you are.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, that's why I call you Beor the Old.
Oh, I'm the Beor the Old to your Malak?
That's what we'll do next time.
Oh, good stuff.
Not as long as you have the pause button. We're not going to do that. And so, should I take the next paragraph?
You do. You have the next. Please take the next paragraph before something bad happens.
All right. Then, by the advice of Felagund, Beor gathered all the wandering families and kindreds of his people, and they removed over Gelion, and took up their abode in the lands of Amrod and Amras, upon the east banks of the Kellon south of Nan Elmoth, near to the borders of Doriath. And the name of that land thereafter was Estelad, the encampment. But when after a year had passed, Felagund wished to return to his own country, Beor begged leave to come with him, and he remained in the service of the king of Nargothrond while his life lasted. In this way he got his name, Beor, whereas his name before had been Balan, for Beor signified vassal in the tongue of his people. The rule of his folk he committed to Baran, his elder son, and he did not return again to Estelad.
Wow.
Well, this is where those names really start to get confusing, isn't it? Baran, son of Balan.
Baran, yeah, they do. And Beor's a little easier, but yeah, Balan and Baran, it's like, oh man, and you're right, that's exactly the kind of stuff we're going to start seeing. Yeah. I love the opening line, though. By the advice of Felagund, Beor, come here, we got to talk.
You might want to move these guys
that direction. There's somebody with some slender bows pointing at you.
Yeah, the real gentle nudge, like, hey guys,
can we just move this way?
Just move this way? I think I hear rustling in the leaves. Yeah, but but it's advice. It's hey, you're my friend. I want to take care of you guys, and you have some unfriends in those woods right there. Yeah. So let's move on.
Yeah,
it's not it's not an elvish, we command you as the elves who live here, to leave this place. It's nothing like that.
No, and even the Green Elves, to their credit, are not saying, make them. He's saying, if you have influence, please use it to encourage them to move on.
That's true.
They are the Elves of Osirian are kind of loners.
Yeah,
they really, they have been ever since their king was killed. I get it.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not unheard of to pursue an isolationist policy after losing a head of state in battle.
True that.
Very cool. So he moves. So he goes. Yeah, and he stays with Finrod for the rest of his life, and they call him Beor, which means vassal. And here again, I saw a word that I didn't know. I had to go down a rabbit hole on it.
Of course you did.
So again, I'm going to assume that this is Taliska. It's kind of hard to find more on it. And I know Tolkien tells us what.
There.
No. And I know Tolkien tells us what it means, but I'm not going to let that go. I did, because I knew that Talisker was based on Germanic, I actually went and looked to see if I could find any Germanic words that kind of had this meaning and that kind of sound. And wouldn't you know, I found a word that might be familiar to Tolkien readers. There's an Old English word, Beorn, which means warrior. And of course, it's the name of Beorn from The Hobbit, right? Which
means warrior. Okay.
It means warrior. It is also cognate with the Norse word for bear, which I think is why he created that character to be a warrior and a bear.
Right.
But in Old English, it only ever means warrior. There's no reference to it ever actually meaning bear in Old English. And it might actually be related to the Germanic word that is the origin of the word baron, which I thought was fascinating, which does have a connotation of not only warrior, but also servant, member of a household.
Right. Somebody who owes allegiance, fealty. Yeah.
Yeah. Or vassal.
Vassal. So, right. That would be a vassal, wouldn't it?
I think that's where that's coming from, which is kind of neat. I kind of feel like I kind of cracked through the code a little bit there.
Impressive stuff.
Thank you. And again, it's also related to the name of Beorn from The Hobbit. So just interesting linguistic stuff. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say that Beorn from The Hobbit is descended from Beor, or is any way related to Beor. I've seen people say that.
Stretch.
It would. I've seen people say it. I've seen people have all this I've seen the charts and the graphs where people think it's true, but I'm there's just nothing there to support it. But it's definitely interesting, the linguistic connection, even if there's not an actual genetic connection there.
Right. Good point.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, good stuff on that. I appreciate you digging into vassal, because I would have kind of just glanced through. Oh, well, Tolkien says it means vassal, so it means vassal. I wouldn't have.
That is not good enough for Sean.
I love that root. Finding those roots and going back into Germanic and Old English. Good stuff. I'll go ahead and tackle the next paragraph here. We're getting a little bit more about the more unfriendly green elves.
All right.
Soon after the departure of Felagund, the other men of whom Beor had spoken came also into Beleriand. First came the Haladin, but meeting the unfriendship of the green elves, they turned north and dwelt in Thargelion, in the country of Caranthir, son of Feanor. There for a time they had peace, and the people of Caranthir paid little heed to them. In the next year, Marach led his people over the mountains. They were a tall and warlike folk, marching in ordered companies, and the elves of Osirian hid themselves and did not waylay them. But Marach, hearing that the people of Beor were dwelling in a green and fertile land, came down the dwarf road and settled in the country south and east of the dwellings of Baran, son of Beor, and there was great friendship between those peoples. Felagund himself often returned to visit men, and many other elves out of the Westlands, both Noldor and Sindar, journeyed to Estelad, being eager to see the Edain, whose coming had long been foretold. Now Atani, the second people, was the name given to men in Valinor in the lore that told of their coming. But in the speech of Beleriand, that name became Edain, and it was there used only of the three kindreds of the elf friends. More unfriendly elves, of course.
Yeah, of course.
But only when they feel like they have the upper hand.
Very true.
This Marach fellow, we're just going to hide and let them go.
Yeah, that's very true. Caranthir paid little heed to them.
I know. The people of Caranthir, whatever.
You kind of figured, again, we talked about Caranthir before. He's probably just like, yeah, can I make money off of them?
They don't have much money. They're not going to be They're not going to be economic use.
Yeah. All they have is rude harps. They're not going to
rude
not
harps.
Much trade. Rude harps.
Can't make much of a business doing that. I mean, there's really not a lot of purpose. No. You're just going to ignore them.
Yeah, exactly.
But the big group heads over to the encampment, to Estelad, and lives just south and east of them. And they end up being really good friends. They connect, like we talked about. You said the Haladin are linguistically separated and therefore also culturally separated.
Right.
And then there's just that little tiny tidbit about the fact that the name Atani kind of got turned into Edain.
Right.
but the key, it's only used of those three.
Of the three kindreds of the elf friends of these three families.
The people of Marach, the people of Beor, and the Haladin.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Elves show up. Elves say, it's almost like Finrod goes around and like a carnival barker, step right up.
Hey, guys, step right up and see
and see the weirdest thing this side of Cuivianen. They've got beards.
The hairy people with the rude harps.
Oh,
I obviously can't get that rude harp out of my head.
I know, neither can I. Apparently, I really stuck that with you. It was almost like the Darth Onion thing you did to me. Thanks. Exactly. I get my revenge.
Yep, the rude harp.
The rude harp. So they come from all over.
Shows up. Yeah.
Yeah, and interestingly, the young men of the Edain go with the kings and lords of the Eldar and took service with them.
Right.
Fascinating. I mean, it's a way for them to get embedded in that culture, to gain that knowledge.
Yeah,
really cool.
Yeah, anybody who's a student of history has seen this before. Primitive people come to this place, and there's this advanced civilization. And
yep.
Okay, yeah, we'll go work for these guys. There's there's knowledge in it. There's potentially security and money in it for
land.
We
Absolutely.
don't hear much about money in Tolkien's world, but it's definitely
wealth in terms of land, in terms of
a comfortable life that they can find there.
Well, especially with
aside from
with Finrod, because wasn't it his group that brought more treasures than any of the others of the Noldor?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
I want to work for Finrod. He pays better.
He probably He probably did have some pretty good salaries.
But they didn't even. So the young men go and take these jobs, but even the rest of the Edain still wanted to go westward. They felt like, hey, this isn't our stopping point.
Right.
But they're kind of stuck. They can't go straight west because they're right in front of Doriath.
Right.
And they can't go to the south because they can't cross Sirion and all the fens and swamps down there. So the three houses of the Noldor say, come on, move over, move with us. And so sure enough, by small groups, families and kindreds and, bigger groups, they get up and they leave Estelad. And it takes about 50 years, but then by that point, most of them, many thousands at least, the text says, have entered the lands of the kings. And most of them, interestingly, it took this long road northward. So if you look at the map, I'm going to look at loaderproject.com, Estelad right there, to the east of Doriath, to the south of Nan Elmoth, where we were last chapter.
Yep.
They went north. Now, they didn't go through Nandon Gortheb. They went the long way north. They went all the way up above Dorthonion.
So they went through the Pass of the Mountains.
Yeah, they went through, probably the Pass of Aglon there.
Oh, yeah, I guess so. They must have gone through the Pass of Aglon.
Or through the March of Mithros, but I would imagine they would have gone the more direct route, the Pass of Aglon. And then up along the north side of Dorthonion.
And then down through...
the Pass of Tol Sirion.
The Pass of Anak. Oh, I was thinking the Pass of Anak, but...
which one's that?
That's the one on the map that's between Gondolin and Eric Gorgoroth?
Oh, yeah. No, I think they went...
No, did they go through
Tol
Sirion?
there's something they talk about coming down the Sirion in a couple of spots or one spot.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay.
And some of them end up going straight west and end up in Hithlum and Dorloman. So...
Right.
But they take a very long route because that's the safe way. The people of Beor came to Dorthonion, and they dwelt in lands ruled by the House of Finarfin. And then Marach's people, his son, had become Aradan. I know names. It's even worse when the guy has two names, right?
Yeah.
So, but his people, Marach's people...
Malak, son of Marach, who becomes Aradan. Yeah, that's not confusing at all.
The second group of people... they go straight westward and end up in Hithlum. But some of them also passed down Sirion into Beleriand and dwelt in the vales of the southern slopes of Ered Wethrin. So, you're talking about right there along the southeast edge of Mithrim and Dorloman, kind of in the mountains there. So then you've got a paragraph. Now that we've got that, I just want to kind of skim that. And we get a little reintroduction of Thingol, right?
Yeah, good old Thingol always comes on the scene.
Always has an opinion.
To give us his thoughts on things, yeah. It is said that in all these matters none save Finrod Felagund took counsel with King Thingol, and he was ill-pleased, both for that reason and because he was troubled by dreams concerning the coming of men, ere ever the first tidings of them were heard. Therefore he commanded that men should take no lands to dwell in save in the north, and that the princes whom they served should be answerable for all that they did. And he said, Into Doriath shall no man come while my realm lasts, not even those of the house of Beor, who serve Finrod the Beloved. Melian said nothing to him at that time, but afterwards she said to Galadriel, Now the world runs on swiftly to great tidings, and one of men, even of Beor's house, shall indeed come, and the girdle of Melian shall not restrain him. For doom greater than my power shall send him, and the songs that shall spring from that coming shall endure when all Middle-earth is changed.
Wow. Thingol once again.
Good old Thingol.
Good old,
it's like,
takes a position.
It's my house.
It's my. You are not coming in here. Melian's, not so much.
Yeah.
Nobody's coming here as long as I'm king.
She's learned not to waste her breath arguing with him, though.
Because he's not going to listen.
Right. He never listens.
She could have said that right then. Actually, one of them is going to come, and I'm not going to restrain him. Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. Nobody's going to be here.
Right.
Oh, and by the way, nobody asked me. I'm kind of ticked.
He was
ill-pleased.
He's ill-pleased. It's a nice little
Isn't that what we used? Isn't that what the text used for what Morgoth was when Glaurung revealed himself? He was ill-pleased. I think
so,
Glaurung had revealed himself early.
Similarly, a nice understatement, I'm sure. Yeah. But yeah, Thingol, this is the role Thingol plays more and more as the text goes on. He's always sort of railing against fate. He's always wrong.
Always on the wrong side. Poor guy.
Yeah, I know. I like him. I want to like him.
Yeah, you want to like him.
But, yeah.
I'd like him more if he listened to his wife.
Yeah, really. For sure, yeah. I mean, you married Amaya. You married up. Yeah,
seriously. You live with an Ainu.
Yeah.
Can you please recognize how much wisdom you have right next to you? Please.
Listen to the lady.
Listen to the lady. She knows what she's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so some men did stay back in Estelad, and there was a mingled people between Malak's people and Beor's people until, of course, they were, fled back after the ruin of Beleriand, which we'll get to, I think, next chapter, right?
Yes.
But I thought this was interesting. I'm not going to read the paragraph, but there's a little passage here about they feared the Eldar in the light of their eyes. That's important. I think this comes back to the Morgoth and the darkness thing, and this because Morgoth and darkness. Morgoth doesn't like light either, right?
True.
We know that how does he feel about Varda? How does he feel about I can't remember her name, the Ainu that's carrying the sun.
Arian.
Yep, Arian. He does not like light,
right?
And so some of these guys, they feared the Eldar in the light of their eyes. I think the only thing that fears light typically is darkness.
Darkness, yeah.
We're talking about not the best of them. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
So, because they're not the best of them, we get dissensions. So we're gonna talk about this paragraph by paragraph. I'm going to start with the first paragraph about this discontent.
Okay.
The leaders of discontent were Bereg of the house of Beor and Amlak, one of the grandsons of Marak. And they said openly, "We took long roads, desiring to escape the perils of Middle-earth and the dark things that dwell there. For we heard that there was light in the west. But now we learn that the light is beyond the sea. Thither we cannot come where the gods dwell in bliss, save one, for the Lord of the Dark is here before us, and the Eldar, wise but fell, who make endless war upon him. In the north he dwells, they say, and there is the pain and the death from which we fled. We will not go that way." So let's talk about that before I'll have you tackle the next paragraph. So this is interesting. They realize now, they've learned, we can't get to the light.
Right.
We can't get all the way over there.
Yeah, this dream that they set out with of finding the light is not attainable for them.
So we can't go far enough west, and we won't go north.
Right.
What are we going to do? So there's the problem, right? So the problem now has been identified. We don't know where to go.
Right.
Go ahead and tell us what they
did about it.
The good guys.
Then a council and assembly of men was called, and great numbers came together. And the elf friends answered Bereg, saying, "Truly from the Dark King come all the evils from which we fled, but he seeks dominion over all Middle-earth. And whither now shall we turn, and he will not pursue us? Unless he be vanquished here, or at least held in leaguer. Only by the valor of the Eldar is he restrained, and maybe it was for this purpose, to aid them at need, that we were brought into this land.
There you go. I love that line. Only by the valor of the Eldar is he restrained. It is by the blood of our people that your lands
Yes, exactly.
are kept safe.
That's just what I was thinking. It reminds me of Boromir again.
Yeah.
But I like this. I like the sentiment. He wants everything. He doesn't just want this area. No matter where we go,
no.
He wants to take it over.
Wherever it is, he's named it to himself forever.
Right.
I named this to myself.
I named this to myself, and I named that to myself. And if we don't fight him here, then he's going to come for us eventually.
Wherever we go, he will come for us eventually. Yeah.
And maybe this is why we're here.
Yeah.
To be fighting with these Eldar now.
Because if we side with them, then, all of a sudden that side is stronger.
Right.
If he hits us each separately, he's going to be able to take everybody down.
Right.
I love this. It's a recognition that, look, we were called here because of the light. But that doesn't mean that we can't stay here. We have a purpose.
Yeah.
But Bereg has something to say, right? To this Bereg answered, "Let the Eldar look to it. Our lives are short enough." But there arose one who seemed to all to be Amlak, son of Imlak, speaking fell words that shook the hearts of all who heard him. All this is but elvish lore, tales to beguile newcomers that are unwary. The sea has no shore. There is no light in the west. You have followed a fool fire of the elves to the end of the world. Which of you has seen the least of the gods? Who has beheld the dark king in the north? Those who seek the dominion of Middle-earth are the Eldar. Greedy for wealth, they have delved in the earth for its secrets and have stirred to wrath the things that dwell beneath it, as they have ever done and ever shall. Let the orcs have the realm that is theirs, and we will have ours. There's room in the world if the Eldar will let us be.
So this is
Neville Chamberlain.
I mean, this is a step beyond isolationism into, no, the elves are the real problem here.
Yeah. The elves are the problem, and we can coexist with the orcs.
Yeah, right, right, exactly. That sounds reasonable. Yeah,
that's reasonable. Let the orcs have their realm. We'll have ours. I'm sure,
that'll work.
They're never going to really bother us if just the Eldar will let us be.
Right. Love this word fool fire, though. That's my favorite word.
That's awesome.
My next new car, I'm going to name it Fool Fire, or get that as a vanity plate or something.
Fool Fire. I got to figure out how to use that in a sentence. It
have to be red. Let me just sports car. Have to be. My Fool Fire.
Your midlife crisis car. I mean, you are approaching that time.
Yes,
you're going to have to get a V8 something.
I think I'm getting close. Yeah.
Trust me. I'm 8 years ahead of you. You're there.
Thank you very much.
The only thing that's stalling it is the fact that your kids are still little.
Exactly.
My goodness.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, this is just what a set of lines, huh?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like you said, this is well beyond, not our business. I mean, he starts out with that, right? Let the Eldar look to it, and he makes an interesting point. Our lives are short enough. We throwing our lives away is foolish because we don't live very long. Yeah,
right.
Okay, there's an interesting point.
Sure,
there.
Bereg actually makes some halfway decent points if you don't know the whole story.
Right, but then this
Amlak guy is just
seemingly Amlak.
Seemingly Amlak guy, yeah.
Yeah.
You spoiled it.
Well, it says there arose one who seemed to all to be Amlak.
That's true.
Tolkien does have this tendency to spoil his own surprises.
That is a good point. That's true.
But I will let you take the surprise. Go ahead.
All right. Then those that listened sat for a while astounded, and a shadow of fear fell on their hearts, and they resolved to depart far from the lands of the Eldar. But afterwards Amlak returned among them, and denied that he had been present at their debate or had spoken such words as they reported. And there was doubt and bewilderment among men. Then the elf friends said, "You will now believe this at least. There is indeed a dark lord, and his spies and emissaries are among us. For he fears us and the strength that we may give to his foes."
Yeah.
You think?
Morgoth. Yeah.
Yeah. I just love.
I wasn't here. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's like, weren't you just here? Like, didn't you just drink 3 whole tankards of mead?
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
Wasn't me.
Wasn't me. Well, let's go to the video. I mean, this is one of those you want to
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
look at the surveillance cams and see if that was really Amlach or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, maybe you're fact-checking him. What do you mean you didn't say that? We have it on tape.
It's right here.
It wasn't me. I didn't say it.
There's the crawl underneath. He did say it.
Well, so you'd think that would be it, right? That, okay, well, now that we know there is an enemy and he's trying to sow dissension among us, you'd think they'd all side up together. But no, some still answered, he hates us, rather, and ever the more the longer we dwell here, meddling in his quarrel with the kings of the Eldar, to no gain of ours. Making it all about just their, their gain. Many, therefore, of those that yet remained in Estelad made ready to depart, and Bereg led 1,000 of the people of Beor away southwards, and they passed out of the songs of those days. But Amlach repented, saying, I have now a quarrel of my own with this master of lies, which will last to my life's end. And he went away north, and entered the service of Mithros. But those of his people who were of like mind with Bereg chose a new leader, and they went back over the mountains into Eriador, and are forgotten.
Amlach's, now it's personal moment.
Yeah.
He's rolling up the sleeves like, I'm going to get this guy.
It's personal now.
Yeah.
In a world where the Dark Lord has accused you of lying.
Oh, man.
It's personal.
Amlach, the untold story.
Master of lies. Coming soon.
Oh, man. That's too good. There's the first Silmarillion movie. Amlach,
I'm pretty sure that the projects, all the people talk about making a Silmarillion film. I don't think Amlach
probably
really
not
shows
talking
up.
about the Amlach.
They probably haven't casted Amlach yet.
Probably not. No. There's your story. There's the story. Who's this Amlach guy? That's who I want to learn more about.
That's right. Actually, I'm curious more about this new leader that's unnamed. The ones that went back over the mountains. That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
There's a story there.
There is. I don't know who.
We digress.
We always do.
We always do. I did think it was interesting, and we touched on this a little bit in our conversation before this, that this tendency about isolationism, we talked about that being something very hobbity. I think you mentioned Bree-ish, Breelander. This kind of isolation,
sort of isolationist mentality. This idea that if I just stay in my little shire, my little town,
they won't bother me if I don't.
They won't bother
them.
me if I don't bother them. Yeah. And that's one of the running themes in Lord of the Rings is that no, that's not going to happen.
Not at all true.
You see what happens to the Shire.
Total naivete. It's total naivete, and it's understandable given the Shire's status as protected by the Rangers.
Yeah,
blissfully unaware.
Right.
But yeah, danger's going to come everywhere, and you're better off facing it with other people who are on the same side. But Bereg still takes 1,000 and leaves, so whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, he's out of the songs of those days, so yeah, that's your loss, pal.
I'm out, guys. Don't write any songs about me.
I don't want any songs. Go. I don't want any rude harps talking about me.
Right.
How many times are we going to get the rude harps in?
I'm gonna go back east and start a little honey farm, and my descendant Beorn will see you again later.
Oh, that would be sad if Beorn's descended from the kind of the wrong part.
The bad guy. Yeah. Yeah. He was an isolationist.
That is true. Absolutely. Well, interesting. So we've touched on the.
I am not really theorizing that Beorn was descended from there.
Yeah,
I just
got to
put that out there for everybody.
I hope nobody else thinks that. Yeah. So we've touched about Amlach, who was descended from Malak, and Bereg, who was descended from Beor. So now we talk briefly about the Haladin. We won't read the next couple paragraphs, but we'll just summarize. They get attacked by an orc raid. They don't live, like in villages or cities. They live set apart, very spread out. So it took them a while to unite. Yeah. But Haldad gathers them all together, retreats to this angle of land between two rivers, builds a stockade, and tries to protect the women and children. And then they were besieged. So then we'll go ahead and have you pick up with that third paragraph there with Haldad and his twin children.
Okay. Haldad had twin children, Haleth his daughter, and Haldar his son. And both were valiant in the defense, for Haleth was a woman of great heart and strength. But at last Haldad was slain in a sortie against the orcs, and Haldar, who rushed out to save his father's body from their butchery, was hewn down beside him. Then Haleth held the people together, though they were without hope, and some cast themselves in the rivers and were drowned. But 7 days later, as the orcs made their last assault, and had already broken through the stockade, there came suddenly a music of trumpets, and Caranthir with his host came down from the north, and drove the orcs into the rivers.
And I want to talk about what happened there with Caranthir, but before we do, I wanted to touch on what we just talked about with the characters. I want to make sure we all understand who Haleth is, because she's going to be real central to the Haladin now.
Yes.
So Haladin gets everybody together, builds the stockade, dies. We just introduced you to this guy, killed him. And we just introduced you to his son, killed him.
He's gone.
But we do have Haleth, and that's good. So then Caranthir shows up, and I'll go ahead and read the next couple paragraphs there. Then Caranthir looked kindly upon men, and did Haleth great honor, and he offered her recompense for her father and brother. And seeing, overlate, what valor there was in the Edain, he said to her, If you will remove and dwell further north, there you shall have the friendship and protection of the Eldar, and free lands of your own. But Haleth was proud, and unwilling to be guided or ruled, and most of the Haladin were of like mood. Therefore she thanked Caranthir, but answered, My mind is now set, Lord, to leave the shadow of the mountains and go west, whither others of our kin have gone. When therefore the Haladin had gathered all whom they could find alive of their folk who had fled wild into the woods before the orcs, and had gleaned what remained of their goods in their burned homesteads, they took Haleth for their chief, and she led them at last to Estalad, and there dwelt for a time. But they remained a people apart, and were ever after known to elves and men as the people of Haleth. So Caranthir.
Yeah, maybe I was a little hard on him.
Yeah,
maybe so. I mean, I don't know. He calling him a petty trade baron and all that stuff, and here he goes saving the Haladin.
Well,
but then again,
late.
Yeah, that's true. He couldn't step in a little sooner.
Yeah.
I mean, but and again, I mean, even Feanor loved his dad, so
that's true. There's always a little bit of good in somebody.
Some good in everybody.
Even somebody like Caranthir.
Yeah.
So, Caranthir, his people had ignored him. What's the passage? It says that they ignored them. Where's the line? I'm looking for it here.
They took no notice of them, I believe.
They took little notice. There we go. The people of Caranthir paid little heed.
Paid little heed to them. That's it.
Well, maybe if you'd paid attention, you would have noticed when they were getting attacked by the orcs.
Yeah, getting slaughtered.
Not that you have responsibility to go and save them. They're not your people. I get that. But I wonder if that's kind of why he offered recompense.
Interesting. Like
I feel a little bad for not paying attention earlier. Because really, if I'd paid attention, your dad and your brother might still be alive, and half your people.
That could be, yeah.
But I'm not going to. I don't want to pin that on him. I mean, it's like I said, it's not his job.
Well, and he does go further, saying that more than just recompense. He's like, hey, look, you guys are valorous. If you want, you can stay here, and you can live with us. You can have the friendship and protection of the Eldar.
Right. Come further north, because they were kind of in the south of the land.
Yeah.
Yeah, he definitely did the right thing. I mean, he really does. Kudos to him for this particular moment.
And Haleth, Haleth is one I want to know more about her. It's unfortunate that there's not too much more about her than what we get here. But
kind of reminds me a little bit of Morwen and Eowyn combined.
Yeah.
This sort of warrior woman, but dour and stern. Yeah. She's an interesting character. I would like to know more about her.
And
There's
she
your
is
other
proud.
Silmarillion movie.
What was that?
There's your next Silmarillion movie.
Yeah, there you go. Right. Haleth, the untold story. In a world where
your brother and father
pin you down in the angle of the rivers. Yeah. But she's proud. She says, no, we're fine. We're good.
Yeah.
We're gonna leave the shadow of the mountains and go west.
Yeah, we're gonna go west.
And they did,
man. And yeah.
Yeah.
And they actually didn't take the long route. we're not going to read that part, but they journeyed through Nandungortheb, the land between the Mountains of Terror and the Girdle of Melian.
Wow, you're not lying. Yeah.
That's nasty stuff. I mean, the text even says this is not as bad as it would become later, but it was no road for mortal men to take without aid.
Wow.
And it was a brutal passing. Her will, the strength of her will, is what it took to get them to go forward. They get over to the other side, and they all were like, man, I wish we hadn't done that. But I'm not going back.
But you've got to imagine the loyalty that her people had for her. Yeah.
Total.
To go through that. Yeah. Amazing.
Really, that's it doesn't, I mean, you really, if you're not looking, you miss that part.
Yeah. I think I have missed that part many times in the past.
So they end up, if we look at the map, they dwelt in the woods beyond Teiglin. But she went a little bit further into the forest of Brethil between Teiglin and Sirion. Now, we're going to end up seeing that later in the Tale of Turin.
Right.
So that area
her
does
people
come
are still
into play.
That's kind of where they're going to stay.
They are.
Or she's going to stay, yeah.
Yeah, and he's going to end up meeting some of these, the people of Haleth.
Yeah.
So we will see these folks again, so don't forget that. But who owns Brethil? Tell us, Sean.
The guy who claims to own it all.
Well, that would be Morgoth. This I name it myself.
That's true. This guy just claims, this part, and you guys can have that stuff up north that I don't have. Okay. Now Brethil was claimed as part of his realm by King Thingol, though it was not within the Girdle of Melian, and he would have denied it to Haleth. But Felagund, who had the friendship of Thingol, hearing of all that had befallen the people of Haleth, obtained this grace for her, that she should dwell free in Brethil, upon the condition only that her people should guard the crossings of Teiglin against all enemies of the Eldar, and allow no orcs to enter their woods. To this, Haleth... I know.
They're gonna.
I know. Right. And that's exactly her response. To this, Haleth answered, "Where are Haldad, my father, and Haldar, my brother? If the king of Doriath fears a friendship between Haleth and those who have devoured her kin, then the thoughts of the Eldar are strange to men." And Haleth dwelt in Brethil until she died, and her people raised a green mound over her in the heights of the forest. Tur Haretha, the Lady Barrow, How then Arwen in the Sindarin tongue.
Beautiful. And it's not the last time we'll see How then Arwen.
That is true.
That is the Lady Barrow. Yeah. Good stuff.
Great case of a woman putting an elf lord in his place. I gotta say. I mean, she doesn't say it directly to Thingol. She's talking to Finrod here, but it's like, you really think that I'm going to make alliance with people who have devoured my kin? And
y'all are weird if you think that's. I mean, pretty much what she says.
But Thingol, I mean, he's got weird ideas.
He really does. I guess he doesn't think much of men. If that they would. Well,
that is true.
She shouldn't let any orcs come in.
Yeah.
Her people were wiped out by orcs.
Yeah.
Well, but still, I don't want her to let any orcs in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we got that.
Yeah, she's going to do that. And what else do we have here? Well,
not a lot on this. I mean, the name of the barrow, right?
Name of the barrow, yeah. So now you know that Arwen means lady,
right?
Which is kind of cool if you're parsing that. And then there's this name of the barrow, Tur Haretha. I haven't figured out what this means, and it says what it means.
Old English or Germanic or anything?
Yeah, I haven't figured out what the Germanic connection is to this one yet, but I'm looking for it.
Okay.
I'm assuming it's, I'm guessing that Haretha, I don't know if that means lady or if that's just her name or what, but that's a fascinating puzzle I'll have to dig into and come back to.
You're right, because it does sound a little bit like Haleth, doesn't it? I mean, there's a little bit of similarity to it, but since we don't know what Haleth means, we certainly speculate as to Haretha.
And maybe Haleth means lady, or maybe it means, something close to lady.
Right, yeah, something along those lines. So basically, by the end of this, we see that there are members of the Edain, these three kinships of the elf friends, that are living kind of scattered all over the place. Some are in big groups and some in small groups. And, they're living all over the place. And they end up learning Sindarin, because Quenion's not being spoken anywhere, as we learned before. But the elves realized it would be good for them to live on their own, set in areas apart where they could, have their own chieftains and stuff, and march under their own banners, but serve as allies. So I skipped that real fast because I wanted to get to the family trees before the end of the episode. Now Hador Lorindal, son of Hathor, son of Magor, son of Malak Aradan, entered the household of Fingolfin in his youth, and was loved by the king. Fingolfin therefore gave to him the lordship of Dorlomin, and into that land he gathered most of the people of his kin, and became the mightiest of the chieftains of the Edain. In his house only the elven tongue was spoken, but their own speech was not forgotten, and from it came the common tongue of Númenor. Mm-hmm. But in Dorthonion the lordship of the people of Beor and the country of Ladros was given to Boromir, son of Boron, who was the grandson of Beor the Old. So we get a little bit, Boromir, cool name, would show up again later.
Yeah, somebody should reuse that name.
Yeah, kind of like the king of the Green Elves, Denethor. Anyway.
Isn't that ironic, considering how the Green Elves felt about these people?
I know, seriously. So this is, 4 generations down from Marach.
I think it sounds right.
So,
yep.
Probably, a couple hundred years, given lordship of Dorlomin, which is in the southern part of Hithlum. I love that they speak only the elven tongue in their house. But, of course, they didn't forget their own speech, and that becomes Númenorian or Adunaic.
Right, exactly. So, basically it's descended from Taliska, but with some Sindarin, I think, in it. Probably some Sindarin loanwords and some stuff like that.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, I want you to read this.
I like
Go ahead,
this bit about the pointing out that Hador was the mightiest of the Edain chieftains. And I like that because this is the mightiest of the Edain chieftains allying himself with the most valiant of the Noldorin lords.
Yep.
This is an elite army.
This is
when we see them in action, this is like, these are the guys. These are the guys you want.
They can get the job done, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
I want you to read this next paragraph, even though it absolutely spoils the rest of the book.
It does, and I've gone back and forth on this one.
Tolkien has done this in so many other places, talking about the Silmarils, for instance. And
you're right. And if Tolkien did it, I guess it's okay. We can go ahead and do it. But
it's not like you're reading something from next chapter. You're just reading what's here.
Yeah.
So go on.
All right. The sons of Hador were Galdor and Gundor, and the sons of Galdor were Hurin and Huor. And the son of Hurin was Turin, the bane of Glaurung. And the son of Huor was Tuor, father of Eärendil the Blessed. The son of Boromir was Bregor, whose sons were Bregolas and Barahir. And the sons of Bregolas were Baragund and Belegund. There's a lot of begats in this one.
No, boy, this is the hard part. This is where we said, look at the family tree.
Right,
Please
exactly.
Look at the family tree.
Yeah. Continuing on. The daughter of Baragund was Morwen, the mother of Turin, and the daughter of Belegund was Rian, the mother of Tuor. But the son of Barahir was Beren Onehand, who won the love of Luthien Thingol's daughter, and returned from the dead. Spoiler. From them came Elwing, the wife of Eärendil, and all the kings of Númenor after.
Spoilers. Even Turin the Bane of Glaurung is a spoiler.
Right, is a spoiler.
Oh, my goodness.
Again, take a look at the family tree, and you will see how closely these families, are connected, and how many crossing points there are.
Exactly, just like we found out with the Elven kindreds. Amazing stuff, and the way he was able to keep this straight. First of all,
yeah, I know.
I mean, even I'm a little confused, but it is late, so I'm going to blame it on that. No. I mean, obviously,
I would just point out that Loader Project is not just a great site for maps. They've also got some good family trees there.
They do. Though I was having a hard time finding the man tree. The elf tree is a little easier to find. It defaults to that.
I think it's on the elf tree, but you have to scroll down.
Way, yeah.
And it's such a big sheet that it's laid out on that it's kind of hard to find.
It is. But the family trees at the back aren't bad. I think they do a pretty decent job of helping you kind of grasp that.
Yeah.
Certainly the one of Beor is pretty solid.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's, you got to know who some of these people are. I mean, it's good to know that, Hurin is the grandson of Hador, So, as he gets to become king of Dorloman, or, the lordship, as he becomes the lord of Dorloman.
Right, yeah.
That explains a lot about why Turin comes back to Dorloman, why that's relevant to him.
Right, of course. Yeah, that's true.
And knowing that Turin and Tuor are, related, they're cousins.
Yeah.
But that Tuor really, takes a very different road. I love comparing Turin to Tuor. We'll do that more when we get to their stories.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah, it's a good one. But yeah, definitely lots of spoilers. I mean, we learned that Turin is the bane of Glaurung, so surprise, surprise.
Right.
When we get to Turin and we see Glaurung, you know it's going to happen.
Yep.
And when you meet Beren and he has two hands, you'll know that something's coming.
At some point, he's going to have one hand.
And he's going to win the Love of Luthien, so but that was probably... I think everybody already knows that.
Yeah,
of Beren and Luthien is probably not a story about how Luthien turned him down over and over.
Right. That's true. That is one that I think everybody at least knows the name of the couple.
That would be a cool story, though. No, I'm not interested. No, not my type. No, go away. Dad, get rid of this guy. Anyway.
And he would.
Good stuff.
And then, of course, all the kings of Númenor coming from Eärendil and Eowyn. Yeah, but hey, that's what the rest of the Silmarillion's all about, right. So we'll get to all of that.
Exactly, and it's not that big a deal that it's been spoiled in terms of the ending, so to speak, of the fate of certain people, because the stories themselves are amazing, even if you know what they are.
Exactly.
So,
and I will say this about this paragraph: if you have trouble remembering other characters as you go on through the Silmarillion, if you can just remember the people mentioned in this paragraph, you'll have a pretty good handle on the story.
And not even all of them. You'll never have to know Galdor and Gundor
and Baragund and Bregalas. Yeah, you don't need those guys.
No, you need to know
Beren,
Hurin and Huor.
Yeah,
Turin and
Tuor.
Tuor, Eärendil, of course. Mm-hmm. You need to know
Morwen and
Rian. Rian, yep. Beren, of course. Luthien, and Elwing. There you go. So there's about a dozen names in there you need to know. But
did you say Eärendil? Say Eärendil.
Yeah, I said Eärendil.
Say it again.
Eärendil? Eärendil? Did I say
No, you said it fine. I just like hearing his name.
That's what I thought. I wondered if maybe you were telling me I mispronounced it. Did I go Deniquetal on you there?
No, you're perfect. You're perfect. I just like to hear Eärendil's name. I get a warm fuzzy every time I hear his name.
A warm fuzzy. Eärendil. It does help, though, that I'm finally pronouncing it correctly. I think when I first read the book, I was trying to stress the A, so it was Eärendil.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of Eärendil.
Well, I mean, do we know exactly how any of these things are pronounced? I mean, we can try,
we do.
But we've got pronunciation guides, but stress is always tough.
Stress is tough. There are rules for the stresses, but I don't remember them off the top of my head, and there are so many exceptions and modifications.
Right.
Because it's usually the antepenult. But then unless there's a this, and then it's this. And
unless there's a long syllable in there, or two consonants. Yeah, exactly. It's all that stuff. So,
man, I'll just guess.
I look it up once and try and memorize it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and read. I'm going to read out the rest of the chapter, but I'm not going to read all of that at once. I'm going to read the next paragraph, and we'll discuss it. So talking about all these men, were caught in the net of the doom of the Noldor, and they did great deeds which the Eldar remember still among the histories of the kings of old. And in those days the strength of men was added to the power of the Noldor, and their hope was high, and Morgoth was straitly enclosed. For the people of Hador, being hardy to endure cold and long wandering, feared not at times to go far into the north, and there keep watch upon the movements of the enemy. The men of the three houses throve and multiplied, but greatest among them was the house of Hador Goldenhead, peer of elven lords. His people were of great strength and stature, ready in mind, bold and steadfast, quick to anger and to laughter, mighty among the children of Iluvatar in the youth of mankind. Yellow-haired they were for the most part, and blue-eyed, but not so was Turin, whose mother was Morwen of the house of Beor. The men of that house were dark or brown of hair, with gray eyes. And of all men they were most like to the Noldor, and most loved by them, for they were eager of mind, cunning-handed, swift in understanding, long in memory, and they were moved sooner to pity than to laughter. Like to them were the woodland folk of Haleth, but they were of lesser stature and less eager for lore. They used few words and did not love great concourse of men, and many among them delighted in solitude, wandering free in the greenwoods, while the wonder of the lands of the Eldar was new upon them. But in the realms of the West, their time was brief, and their days unhappy. So we get a really cool description of each of the peoples.
Yeah.
A physical description.
You really see the phenotype of each of these.
Exactly.
These houses.
Now you can picture them. Now you can understand when they're talking about, Galdor and Gundor, or even Hurin and Huor. You know what they look like. They're big and strong. They're yellow-haired. They're blue-eyed. These are Norsemen. These are, and they're bold. I love the descriptions of them.
Tall, strong warrior types. Yeah.
Quick to anger and to laughter. I mean, who does that remind you of? That reminds me of Tulkas.
Tulkas, yeah.
And he's blonde too.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, I mean, this is very. These are hardy folk.
Just a boisterous, hardy folk.
Yeah, boisterous. Good word there. Beor's house, a little different. They're the dark hair, the gray eyes. I love that the Noldor love them the most because they're most like them. Of course, the Noldor always like things that are like themselves. They're very.
Yes, they are.
They think they're the model by which everybody else should be measured. So
they think they're the bee's knees. Sorry.
Oh, there's your Ferris Bueller's Day Off reference.
Yeah.
Boy, that was a subtle one.
Thank you. Oh man.
So they're eager of mind. They're cunning-handed, quick to learn. I love that they remember things and moved. They aren't given. This really describes Morwen, doesn't it? Moved sooner to pity than to laughter. She was not a very laughable. She was not a woman that laughed a lot.
You used the word dour earlier. I think that's a good word.
Yeah.
They're definitely there's a bit of a sadness, I think, to many of certainly Morwen, with good reason. But they just seem like they seem like a somber people. They kind of
another good word, somber. Yeah, I agree. And then Haleths, were very much like the Noldor, like the people of Beor's house, but they were shorter. And then interestingly, they didn't. You get the feeling they're very much into their solitude.
Yeah.
They typically lived on big homesteads instead of in villages and cities.
They like the wide open spaces more.
Yeah.
They're not they're not into, like you said, they're not into the lore.
No, they're not big talkers. They don't like big groups of people.
Yeah.
I could kind of get along with these folk.
I'm probably more of a Beor's house, honestly, I have to admit.
Yeah, I'm definitely not. I mean, as much as I'd love to be
not
part
one of Hodor's, no.
Yeah, as much as I'd like to say that, I'm not.
I can't hang with them. No.
No, I mean, I might be quick to anger and laughter just as my kids, but
that's true.
I'm big and strong and yellow-haired are not things that describe me.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
As we talk about the folk of Haleth, there's a group that's not mentioned here, and
I was wondering if
looking
you were going to
for
bring
it.
them up. Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking for it, and it's not here in the text. But you remember? I'm thinking of the in the Unfinished Tales, we get that essay about the Druidine.
Wow.
Which
that was
for
an
those
amazing little story.
Oh yeah, such a cool. There's a little essay and a little story. And so for those who don't remember, the Druidine are actually the ones that were in Return of the King. They're called the Woses, or the Wild Men of the Woods. They're the ones, gone, very gone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the Rohirrim ran into them and kind of made a little deal with them.
Yeah.
To get along the road, and they actually are mentioned in Unfinished Tales as actually having been among the folk of Haleth.
Yeah.
But they were not of the folk of Haleth.
No, they were a fourth people. Yeah, you're right.
The strangest of all the customs of the folk of Haleth was the presence among them of people of a wholly different kind.
Yeah.
But they were with the folk of Haleth, and they were counted among the Edain. That's why they're called the Druidine.
Yep.
And the Drew comes from their own word for themselves.
Yep.
And it's, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I just think it's cool that they're there among the Haladin, and you can kind of see them having a lot in common with them.
Yeah, they're quiet. They use few
short
words.
stature. They're quiet. Yep. They like solitude. They kind of seem a little bit more in touch with the earth, liking the spaces, not wanting cities and things like that.
That's a good point.
So it's kind of neat if anybody is going to be getting the Unfinished Tales, which I highly recommend.
Well, they should. We told them that before we get to of Tuor, they need to read at least that chapter.
Yeah.
Now I would recommend, go and read the...
Pick it up and read this chapter as well, and learn a little bit more about the Druedain, because this is the only place you're going to get it.
Yeah, it's really cool. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was thinking about them as well. The stories about them are really fascinating, I have to admit.
Yeah.
But now we get towards the end of the chapter. I'm going to read these last two, and we're going to talk a little bit about death again, and we're going to get to talk about what men learn. I think there's some really good philosophical points here, but let's go ahead and tackle these last two paragraphs.
Okay.
The years of the Edain were lengthened according to the reckoning of men after their coming to Beleriand. But at last Beor the Old died when he had lived 93 years, for 44 of which he had served King Felagund. And when he lay dead, of no wound or grief, but stricken by age, the Eldar saw for the first time the swift waning of the life of men, and the death of weariness which they knew not in themselves, and they grieved greatly for the loss of their friends. But Beor at the last had relinquished his life willingly, and passed in peace. And the Eldar wondered much at the strange fate of men, for in all their lore there was no account of it, and its end was hidden from them. Nonetheless, the Edain of old learned swiftly of the Eldar all such art and knowledge as they could receive, and their sons increased in wisdom and skill, until they far surpassed all others of mankind, who dwelt still east of the mountains, and had not seen the Eldar, nor looked upon the faces that had beheld the light of Valinor. I love that.
Yeah, this is a lot of that, a lot of Tolkien's philosophy wrapped up in these two paragraphs here. Yeah.
The mortality of men, the mystery of death to elves, the fact that it is best for men to relinquish their life willingly.
Yeah, which we see later on with folks like Aragorn and really the good kings of Númenor.
Kings, absolutely, yeah, because the opposite. I mean, every single one of them that fights it, they're the bad guys. They're the bad guys. They're the Ar-Pharazôns or the other ones in that same line.
Right,
and even to an extent, Denethor, who he's about to relinquish his life willingly, but early. He's not dying yet, but he wants to.
Right.
Yeah. Relinquishing it at the right time of free will. Very important.
And talk about the right time. He lived till 93 years old.
93. And he'd only served Felagund for 44 years, so he was already almost 50 years old when he led his people over. And that makes sense. He wouldn't be a 25-year-old and be a chieftain. So I guess that's not too much of a surprise, but...
So you've still got time to enlist in Finrod's service.
He was only a year older than I am when he served King Felagund. I just need to find a king to serve.
Yeah, there you go. Find an elf king to love.
I don't think I'll be 93 though.
No, they weren't kidding when they called him the old man.
Boy, you're not kidding.
That's a good life.
And that's interesting. At the beginning of that paragraph, the years of the Edain were lengthened after their coming to Beleriand. So they lived shorter previously.
Just the exposure to the elves, I think. Yeah, just being there.
Yeah, I think so too. And we see that in that last paragraph.
Yeah.
About looking on the faces that had beheld the light of Valinor. That's something relevant too.
Yeah. But this reaction of the Eldar.
I know.
Man, imagine being an elf and seeing that for the first time.
First time. Just old age. I mean,
they've seen death. They've seen killing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some of them have even seen Miriel.
Yeah.
And they've seen grief, but
just
to see a natural death of old age, and for it to be so quickly in their perception.
93 years.
Wow, he's not even 100 years old. Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Because elves they don't even start a family until they're about 100, right?
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Or is it 50? I think it's 50, isn't it?
Yeah. Either way, I mean, it probably is a lot like them seeing the death of a child. I mean, wow. That
would have hurt. I think that I love the fact that they were just questioning this. They knew not in this death of weariness. They grieved greatly, but the Eldar wondered much. They didn't have an account of. They didn't understand. There was nothing in their lore to explain it.
Right.
And the end was hidden from them. For a good reason, I think. I mean, that's the deal. It's all about nature, right? We've gone back and forth on this before, but the elves have a nature that is coexistent with the life of Arda.
Right.
And therefore, they need to go along with their nature, whereas men, their nature is to die.
Right.
And to leave the world, to leave the circles of the world. They have to embrace that fate.
Yeah.
But
and well, we'll see what what they end up doing with
we'll
that.
We'll get there whether they do that or not.
But this is the start of this lengthening of their ages, and I mean, obviously, we're going to see that really come to fruition with the kings of Númenor, who live hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah.
But it all starts right here, and what's the reason? He tells us what the reason is, doesn't he?
That's right. Exactly. They'd learned of the Eldar, and they'd seen the faces that had beheld the light.
Yeah.
We talked about light earlier. How the people of Doriath are much higher than the other Sindar because of their exposure to Melian.
Right.
And now we find that these guys surpass the other men because they have looked upon the faces that have beheld the light of Valinor.
Right.
So
you get the idea, that they can actually reflect light. The enlightenment of the Eldar, the enlightenment of the Calaquendi can actually enlighten others around them just by exposure to them. It's
absolutely
an incredible and such a powerful image.
Isn't it? I agree.
And I think really this starts something that I think Tolkien wrote was really a chief function of the elves in Arda, wasn't it? Was to start this ennobling process of men.
Yeah.
And I think as we discussed
about that a few episodes ago, didn't we?
Yeah, a few episodes. I think when men came on the scene, we talked about there's this letter that he wrote where he says that this is part of a divine plan for the ennoblement of the human race from the beginning, destined to replace the elves. So this is the fulfillment of the Eldar's purpose, is to ennoble mankind and then to fade, to still be in Arda but to fade.
My goodness! And on that note, it's going to wrap it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. We do thank you very much for joining us, but before we start up our usual closing music, which I'm sure you're missing right now, going, where is that beautiful tune? We have some announcement about some upcoming episodes, right?
Yes, we do. We've got a little holiday surprise for you all next week. Instead of for all 11 of you, instead of releasing our next episode in 2 weeks, which would actually be New Year's Day, we're going to be releasing a special episode on Friday, December 23rd. We're going to be taking a break from the Silmarillion to dive into a slightly lighter work. It's Professor Tolkien's Father Christmas letters, or letters from Father Christmas, depending on which edition you have.
And that's a collection of letters that Tolkien wrote to his kids every year for 20 years at Christmas, writing as Father Christmas, or as we know him here in the U.S., Santa Claus. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're delighted to take a little break from the heavy analysis of the Silmarillion, just to relax and enjoy a delightful little holiday read.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I mean, I really don't want to be talking about Morgoth this close to Christmas.
No, definitely not.
And then after that episode, we're going to be releasing another special on Tuesday, January 3rd, in honor of Professor Tolkien's 125th birthday.
Yay.
So that's when Alan and I are going to be raising a toast to the professor. We'll share our thoughts on Tolkien, and we'll also share those that we've gotten from our listeners on what Tolkien means to them.
What a great way to ring in the new year. A couple of days late, but still, we're celebrating the birthday and ringing in our next year on the podcast as well.
There you go. Exactly.
That's also when we'll be doing our 2 giveaway drawings. So if you've submitted your thoughts, or if you've ever submitted a question to Bartleman's Bag, definitely tune into that one to see if you might be one of our lucky winners.
Yes, indeed. And then after that episode, that's when we'll resume our regular bi-weekly schedule on Sunday, January 15th with Chapter 18 of The Ruin of Beleriand and the Fall of Fingolfin, which, as you can tell by the title, is going to get us right back to our usual depressing gloom and doom.
We'll still try to make it entertaining. Remember, if you need cheap paperbacks to mark up, please use the links on our library page at theprancingponypodcast.com. We also have links to audiobooks and music CDs and various other things for your Tolkien collection.
And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe on iTunes or Google Play Music. And we need your iTunes reviews and your Google Play reviews, so please leave one if you haven't. And we greatly appreciate your support there.
That we do. There have been 15 reviews, so at least 15 people have listened to us.
That's right. That's right. And we're also on Stitcher and TuneIn. And special thanks to those of you who've been connecting with us on social media. This is The Prancing Pony, and we love the conversation in the common room with all of you on Facebook at The Prancing Pony Podcast and on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod.
And social media, of course, is a great place to share our podcast as well. So please retweet us, share us, put those little hashtag thingies in there. I don't know how that works. Tell your friends. Anyway, one last thing as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, or your Desert Island Elf Song playlist, especially ones with rude harps.
Rude harps.
To the Prancing Pony Podcast at gmail.com, and we'll try to get to them in our next episode. Well, my goodness, 2 hours is still far too short a time to spend amongst such admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.